All things have a beginning, and this was the beginning. Before the words Weston State Hospital were ever spoken, before the term Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was ever marketed, there was another name: the Lunatic Asylum West of the Allegheny Mountains. This was the first name, the true one, written in ledgers and letters now lined with dust. Its purpose was not presentation, it was healing. The year was 1864. The nation was bleeding through its final battles, and a new state, West Virginia, had barely taken its first breath. Yet even in that chaos, men and women turned their hands towards mercy. It was the fall of 1864 when this place opened its doors, quietly, humbly, with nothing more than conviction. No pageantry, no parade, only purpose. From that act of resolve came 130 years of history. This is not a ghost story. This is a record of conscience. It is the story of how one state, even in war, chose compassion over convenience and built a monument not to fear, but to care. On January 1, 1864, the newly formed Board of Directors met in Weston, West Virginia. Governor Arthur I. Borman had charged them with completing what the old state of Virginia had begun, a hospital for those the world called insane. They organized with Richard P. Camden as president, Thomas L. Moore as secretary pro tem, and George A. Jackson as treasurer. The members, Camden, McGrew, Hildreth, Shaw, Hale, and Farnsworth, divided themselves by law into 2 terms of service. Dr. E. A. Hildreth designed an official seal. An inventory was taken, valuing the institution's property at $11,182.80. Their next act was to find a superintendent, not merely an administrator, but a physician worthy of the charge. The unfinished south wing stood waiting. Work was slowed by shortages, laborers were few, wages were high, and the war had drained resources. The drainage system had to be rebuilt, and the heating contractor fell behind schedule. Still, progress came. Floors laid, plaster spread, and paint brushed in place. By late October, the board reported the wing completed, its workmanship challenging the admiration of all who inspect it. The asylum, long planned and long delayed, was finally ready to serve its purpose. In August of that year, the board secured Dr. R. Hills of the Central Ohio Lunatic Asylum as superintendent and Mrs. E. G. Hills as matron. Both were veterans in their field, calm, disciplined, and humane. On October 22, 1864, they opened the doors. 9 female patients transferred from temporary care in Ohio became the first residents. By the end of the year, there were 21, with more waiting for admission. The south wing could hold 36 patients, 45 if crowded. A spring from the hillside, 1,200 feet away, was piped through galvanized iron into an attic tank, feeding the boilers with clean, mineral-free water, a small but vital triumph. Ventilation was excellent, the water closets, in the superintendent's words, perfect. Only the boilers were undersized for the burden to come. But 1864 was a year when war paid visits uninvited. In September, Confederate raiders struck Weston, looting the hospital's new supply of bedding and blankets. A second shipment, ordered from Baltimore, was destroyed in another raid on the B&O Railroad. A third had to be bought, an unplanned expense of $2,159.42. When the loss was known, the townspeople of Weston acted without hesitation. They brought their own blankets and linens so that strangers, patients they had never met, would not go cold. The board entered their thanks in record. It remains there still. By December, the books were complete. Receipt showed a balance of $9,541.98, expenditures of just over $3,000, and Dr. Hills himself supervised an additional $3,011.12 for expenses for bedding, fixtures, and provisions. The accounts closed with a deficit of only $11.12, a testimony to discipline in an age without calculators, credit cards, or mercy for error. Still, debts endured. There were $2,872 in wages, supplies, and furniture left unpaid. The board requested that the amount, along with $14,000 for 1865 operations, as well as $65,000 to continue construction, as they warned that the delay would spoil exposed timbers and waste the investment already made. Then came Dr. Hill's own report, part science, part sermon. He accepted his appointment while still in Columbus and, following instructions from Governor Borman on October 19th, departed on October 20th with Mrs. Hill and a small corps of assistants. Until Dr. Hill's official term began in November, Dr. N.B. Barnes served as assistant physician, making preparations, supervising the wards, and executing any medical duties required until the superintendent formally assumed authority. At that time, a number of West Virginia's own citizens, men and women alike, were still confined elsewhere. Some remained in Columbus, others at Longview and Cincinnati, and still others within Virginia's eastern and western lunatic asylums. When West Virginia separated from Virginia, the old Commonwealth had severed every official tie, denying all further public service or financial accountability to its former counties. Yet within those hospitals, something more humane triumphed. Though the law no longer bound them, the asylums did not cast the patients out. In fact, Virginia even admitted a small number of West Virginia residents during the war itself. They were allowed to remain patients without a state until West Virginia could provide for them itself. It was, in its own silent way, an act of grace amid political division, a remembrance that even in times of separation, mercy can outlast allegiance. Dr. Hill's first report looked back on the beginning and forward to what the institution could become. His words reached beyond accounting. Perhaps nothing, he wrote, marks civilization more clearly than its effort to relieve the distresses of humanity. He saw insanity not as damnation, but as an illness, an obscuring of intellect that could, with treatment, be healed. What is blindness or deafness, he asked, compared to the loss of reason? Madness combines all misfortunes, blindness to truth, deafness to reason, and poverty of soul. He declared that from 1/3 to 3/4 of all patients would recover when treated early. He reminded the state that to cure one case was to save the cost of a dozen unhealed. He urged lawmakers to act boldly, to enlarge the hospital, to overcome public prejudice, and to fund care not as charity, but as duty. These are hospitals, he wrote, where the insane are treated with more kindness and tender solitude than by their nearest kin. His list was practical and precise. More furniture, iron window guards, paving for the basement, heating for the gymnasium, among other things. He estimated the total cost at $14,000. He asked for no luxury, only the means to make the place humane. He closed his report not with policy, but with prayer. I will only add an expression of hope that our new institution may receive the cordial goodwill of the people and the material aid from the state authorities, and the prayer that it may receive the blessing of the Supreme Head of all benevolence. And with those words, the record of 1864 ended, with faith, not fatigue, purpose, not pride. What began that autumn still stands. Its stones have felt mercy and neglect, heard silence and screaming, and survived the passing of centuries. When the last patient left, 130 years had gone by. Names changed, meanings shifted, but the truth remains. The first name, the Lunatic Asylum West of the Allegheny Mountains. The first purpose, healing, not spectacle. What survives today is not merely architecture, but an echo of conscience, of a moment when West Virginia decided that care for the vulnerable would become part of its identity. Those who protect Weston's legacy do so not for notoriety, but for fidelity to the record, to the work, and to what it stood for. Because history is not measured by what we own, but by what we honor, and the true heritage of Weston was never madness, it was mercy. But the spirit of it, the call to conscience, still stands in those halls, quiet, steady, and waiting for those who remember why it was built. Because in the end, the greatest monuments are not made of stone, but of compassion that continues beyond it. And that is the beginning.